Welcome to From the VC's Bookshelf, a podcast from TBR, the College System of Tennessee, the state's largest higher education system. In this series, we examine how we might re-envision the work we do and how we work together as we move into a post-pandemic world. Please join our host, Dr. Heidi Lemming, Vice Chancellor for Student Success, as she leads a live discussion with industry experts and leaders throughout our system.
In our fall 2023 podcast series, we are leaning into themes found in Atomic Habits by author James Clear. The TBR System Office has been engaged in testing out mindset interventions with students in gateway courses for about 7 years now. And while Atomic Habits doesn't specifically use the word mindset, the book touches on similar themes. So our series will draw connections between the two bodies of work and also highlight how our research partners, faculty, and staff are working to change student habits and mindsets in support of academic success and college completion. In today's podcast, I'm excited to be talking to Michelle Marsh from Volunteer State Community College. Michelle is the department chair of the math department at Volunteer State and also served as the site coordinator for the Tennessee Value Project, one of the mindset projects that were scaled across the TBR system over the last couple of years. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm excited today's conversation to dig in more deeply with a faculty member, particularly in math, because that was our focus for the project.
Yes.
So I think our listeners are going to be really interested in hearing what we did. So to start with, can you summarize the work that you've been engaged in with academic mindset at Volunteer State?
Well, I know there's several things going on at the college that I'm not even involved in. There's a lot of high impact practices. We have student service learning, study abroad, work-based learning, a lot of different things. And so I'm excited that I got to look into that a little more as I was preparing for this, just to kind of get some more ideas.
Yeah.
But I was specifically involved, as you said, with the Tennessee Value Project. And I was the site coordinator. And so I kind of was that connection between TBR and our faculty and helped them organize all of that. I think it was a great success. We got a lot of good information from our students. It really helped the students kind of draw some real life experiences and how a math class can connect to those, because that's not always obvious for students.
Right.
And so by helping them, just recognize what that practical value of being a student and being a learner can help them outside of the classroom.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about in the Gateway Math courses, what are some of the things that you tested out?
So we started last fall of 2022, and in the project. And so students were throughout the semester given these surveys to ask them questions, and the students thought they were all going to be math-based questions.
And they weren't, evidently.
They were not at all. It was more about being a learner and those mindsets and how do you set goals and how those things that come from it. And so they were surprised when they came back, especially after that first survey that they had. And so they would come back to the classroom, and I talked to a couple of the instructors, and they're like, yeah, they were shocked. They didn't know what, is this a math assignment? What is going on? And so it really allowed the instructors of those courses to open up and have some good conversations that they would not normally have in a math class about setting goals, about their mindset, about being an active learner and things like that. Okay.
So what did you see as a result of those interventions?
So I personally did not actually have a class that qualified.
Oh, okay.
So I had to reach out to some of the other instructors to find out what they had.
Yeah.
And like I said, the one instructor, she felt it really helped her students to kind of dig deeper into what they were doing and not just look over something and then move on, like to really try to understand. Like if they can have a deeper understanding of what they're doing, they're more likely to be successful.
Yeah.
And so I think that opened a lot of her students' eyes, and those conversations came about because of these surveys that these students were doing that they would not have normally had.
So normally in a math class, you're covering particular math-related topics. You're working through those exercises. And so what you're describing is a faculty member early in the semester having a conversation with a student about kind of the purpose behind how their learning applies to their life or their future career goals.
Yeah, and I think another example that can kind of tie that in is, you know, I have students that come to me all the time and like, why do I need to learn to factor? I'm never going to use this in my life. And I have to explain to them that it's not about learning how to factor. I'm teaching you how to be a critical thinker.
Right.
I'm just using algebra or some other math course to help you think about those things.
Right.
And so that this kind of allowed that concept to come out more directly than normally.
Yeah. And the great thing about that is so many times students are like, you know, don't understand the relevance of like, say, any general education course. We just happen to focus on math because all of our students have to take a math course.
Right.
Or just like an English course too, right? We've got some folks that have done work in English. But, you know, it really kind of reminds them that it's not just studying content in a specific field that you plan to work in, but it's thinking more globally about the skills that you developed in your general education courses that, regardless of what job you have, are applicable.
Right. And I tell students all the time, you get a college education, it tells your employers, hey, I know a little bit about a lot of different things. Or, hey, I didn't know a thing about biology, and I don't need biology in my degree or in my field, in my career. But I was able to take concepts that I did not understand and master them.
Yeah.
And so that tells those employers, hey, we can give them a new task or a new concept. We know they'll be able to master this.
Right. And hopefully in that process of a student reflecting on that value, like, again, the purpose of why I'm doing this, then they're a little bit more open to the learning experience itself, right?
That's the hope, yeah.
And making those connections. I mean, again, it's not like you don't have to be majoring in math, but figure out the applicability just everyday life for you moving forward, right? That's great. So as you reflect on kind of this, the book that we're trying to make the connection with here, Atomic Habits, what have you found to be helpful in the work? You know, what have you learned, not that you directly taught a course, but you were the coordinator with many faculty who were engaged. What did you learn from them about what worked well? Maybe what were lessons learned that the faculty shared with you?
Well, I think the biggest lesson for me personally was making sure that students are aware of the opportunities that we provide to them outside of just teaching a concept. And so we're not just asking them to master a math course, right? Or an English course or what it is. We're asking them to learn and to grow. And so the Tennessee Value Project asks students questions about their mindset, about what they think about this and how they value different things, specifically learning. And so as I said, students didn't expect that.
Yeah, right.
Right. So one thing that I discussed is with another instructor that I never really thought about before was some of our students don't know how to make goals. They've never been taught how to make a goal and how to progress through little steps along the way to reach those goals.
Okay.
And so I thought it was very helpful just to realize that we have to think more even basic. Then we try to come up with these big plans and these big ideas, but some of our students just need some very basic information on how to get started.
Right. That's great because in the book, Atomic Habits presents us model for creating good habits and breaking bad habits. And one of them is, making a good habit has to be obvious, attractive, easy, to your point, right? Small, and making it somewhat satisfying. And of course, the inverse works for breaking a bad habit. You have to make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, or make it unsatisfying. So when we think about this model and reflect on the idea of like students not knowing how to set goals, but even specifically habits, because I mean, habits is all about, in a lot of ways how we learn or habits that we form, right?
Right.
And more broadly thinking about the learning context for this question. I mean, do you think that model will work that's proposed by the author in terms of, and maybe speaking specifically to the easy part, because you just already mentioned that.
Well, yeah, so it can work, but I think at the same time, implementing it is not always easy, especially in math. I find the majority of my students are one way, that they either love math or they hate it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of in between.
Yeah.
And so when you have a student that comes in that hates math before you've ever started anything, and you want to help them to make it easy for them, they've struggled with it. That's why they hate it, because they've struggled with it for so long. And so now we have to find ways to help them understand it, to make it appear easy, right? To make it appear obtainable for them. And so making that attractive to somebody who doesn't like math to start with, you have to get creative.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, math is about kind of like following different steps too towards a bigger goal. It's kind of similar when we think about, how it could be very methodical in that way. I remember I reflect, in high school thinking that math was quite the challenge, and I took a lot of different math courses and then went to college. And for whatever reason, it was much easier for me there. Maybe I was pushed a little bit harder in my math courses in high school. But that impression, again, like to your point, I went into the classroom expecting to hate the math course, right? That it was going to be this horrible thing. But I was surprised that it wasn't for me. Probably maybe the same thing can be true for other students if they just found a way of learning the content, or a teacher that teaches it in a way that is new to them, maybe that they didn't experience that in high school, and now it's starting to click. I mean, that certainly happens.
Yeah, trying to find a instructor who has a teaching style that fits the student's learning style. Sometimes it just happens. You just sign up for a class, and that teacher teaches in a way that you understand, and sometimes it just doesn't. And you struggle the whole semester understanding what's going on. And so students will, if they don't pass and they sign up for the class again, I'm like, and it was my class, I'm like, are you sure you want to take me again? Like, not that I don't feel I'm a bad teacher, but maybe my style of teaching doesn't fit your style of learning. And you may need to find someone else that has that connection.
Right. Yeah, that could be true of a lot of different courses, not just math, too.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, the author makes a distinction between setting habits that focus on specific goals as the outcome versus habits that have a systems-based approach. So goals are about the results you want to achieve, whereas systems are about the process that lead to those results. The book claims that if you've had trouble changing your habits, the problem isn't you, the problem is the system. And that bad habits repeat themselves again and again, not because you don't want to change, but because you have the wrong system for change. Obviously, the work that the system office, I'm using system as the collective of schools in the state of Tennessee, the work that we've been doing around mindset is an attempt to alter that system of how we teach to get better results from students. So when the author is describing habit setting to, we want to make this comparison with the mindset philosophy that we've tested at institutions, what are the systems that you've now identified that maybe we need to change for students? So,
well, I think a lot of times as students, advisors, instructors, we tend to focus on the grade, the outcome of the course. Did you pass? Did you get a specific grade that allows you to pass the course? Did you get a specific grade to get into the program that you want? Are you able to continue? And so focusing that as a goal is not always the best idea.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about the grade. And so if we can tend to help our students reimagine that and rethink that in a way that they are focusing on what did they learn? What is their goal, to just pass a class, or is their goal to understand the concepts?
Right.
I cannot pass a class and still learn a lot. Learn a lot. And so if we can instill that in them, that your goal is to learn this material, to master this material, regardless of the outcome of the grade. And so if we can change that mindset from being grade focused to learning focused, I think that's the system that we need to approach, and that make it a good habits. So how do you learn? You have to have good study habits. You have to show up to class.
Right.
You can't skip all your classes and expect to understand what's going on. You have to ask questions. You can also attend class and sit in the back and not do anything. But if you're asking questions and you're engaging yourself into the lecture or into the presentation or the discussions or whatever's going on, you pick up so much more than just sitting there.
Right. Excellent. So, we're really thinking about, it's not just about the mere fact that you're learning the content in the course, it's how you go about doing the learning.
Yes. And just learning it to pass a test, we can all probably sit down and memorize a couple things to pass a test.
Right.
But it's that understanding that we can take further with us instead of, oh, I got enough to get out of this class, let me move on. No, I've got enough to move on and bring that learning with me for future classes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's valuable even for our faculty to realize about how they impact the system of learning, right? Because some of the research that we did across our institutions was also thinking about if a faculty member has a fixed mindset, the impact that has even on the students' learning. And there was some evidence that would suggest that if a faculty member just thinks they can't get it, or they're not good at math, that they just didn't teach in a way that promoted a growth mindset with the students to be successful.
It's almost as if they give up on the student before they have a chance. Yeah.
Right. So it's on both sides of the equation, right? It's not just, to use a math term, it's not just about, the students having a fixed or growth mindset, but it also can be the person doing the teaching and the impact of
absolutely
that might be. So the book also explains how small changes in context can lead to larger changes in behavior over time, and that every habit is initiated by a cue, and we're more likely to notice cues that stand out. So to trick building good habits in our lives is to make the cues of good habits obvious in our environment, and then gradually the habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior. So the context becomes the cue. This is, I know, getting a little technical in what the book's describing, but in your opinion, when we think about educators and the design of the educational environments for success, how can we design a setting where it's easy for students to maintain good habits and support their learning? So thinking about the cues that we give them.
So I think one thing is, we're teaching, especially in math, we're not teaching new concepts in math. The concepts are the same, right? Algebra is the same. But how we teach that can change. And those cues that we need to pick up on our students on what they need to understand this. And so I think we need to incorporate a lot of active learning, and not just have the students sit there and listen, but have that involvement throughout the class period and get them involved in it. We can, again, the concepts are the same, but we can reimagine how we present those concepts to the students. And there's so many new resources now that we can use, and tools available for the students that if they don't understand, well, go watch this video. Maybe this person explains it in a way that you can understand better than what I did. Or even sometimes myself, oh, you didn't understand that. Let me explain it in a different way. But if I'm just lecturing and the students are just sitting there, I don't know they need a different way. And so interacting with the students a lot more, I think, is one thing that needs to happen. The other thing is taking out the fear.
Yes.
Students are afraid to be wrong.
Yeah.
They're afraid. They don't want to answer a question and it be wrong in front of everybody else. And so there's a couple ways around that. We have a lot of new technology that we can use in the classroom where students can answer questions and nobody knows who answered. It's all electronic. It gets displayed up on the board or whatever. No one knows who answered what.
Right.
So you may be wrong, but no one knows it was you. The other thing about taking out the fear. I did not realize this. I had a class one time, and in the first week, I made a mistake in front of everyone. I didn't think anything of it. I fixed it. Oh, sorry, this is not right here. Let's do this. Let's fix it. And I moved on.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the semester, I had a student come into my office, and I'd gotten to know her fairly well. She was in there quite often getting extra help.
Yeah.
And she told me at the end of the semester, she's like, that first week when you made a mistake, I knew I was in the right class.
Oh.
And I was like, what? I made a mistake. Why were you in the right class? She said, it made me feel like you were more on my level, and that if you can make a mistake, I can make a mistake, and it's okay.
Right.
And so I was like, never even thought of it that way. Like these students come in scared to death, especially if they're struggling in math.
Yeah.
And to show them like, it's okay. I often tell my students all the time, you learn more from making mistakes. I would rather you make a mistake than be right 100% of the time, because you're going to learn from those mistakes more than you learn from being right all the time.
Right.
So just take that fear out of the students' minds.
Yeah, I love that story because there's two things there that really stand out to me. One, kind of the relationship between the faculty member and the student, and that you're able to show that you're just a regular person. You're not up on a pedestal. Everyone makes mistakes, and then that made the student more comfortable coming to talk to you, right?
Absolutely.
But the other part is how technology can be used in a way that kind of normalizes. You're not the only one who didn't get the answer right? And so you don't feel like, why am I the only one not getting this?
Right. Well, the opposite, I had actually the opposite happen in class this week.
Oh, okay.
I asked a question, and I tell them all the time, let's vote. Who thinks it's this? Who thinks it's this? Every person but one thought the answer was A. And then they all raised their hand. And then the person who thought the answer was B was very hesitant. They were like barely raising their hand, didn't want anyone else to know they were going against what everyone else in the class said. And I looked and I said, you should raise your hand high because you are right.
You're the only one.
The only one that was right. And so it's okay. It's okay to be different than the majority or everyone else, because sometimes you're not the one that's wrong.
Right.
So yeah, it goes both ways.
That's great. I love that. Well, and again, I think it's just about one of those things where it's making people feel more comfortable in
Absolutely.
that place, right? And it's not high stakes.
No, not at all. It's
Right?
a learning environment. We're there
Right.
to learn. We're there to make mistakes. We're there to grow.
Yeah. Good. Well, speaking of technology, I mean, I'm always curious right now. There's lots of conversations about the use of AI, and certainly this is applicable to when I'm sitting in front of a faculty member, because I know there's lots of conversations about how this will affect how you teach and how students will learn. So, when we think about habit forming and the use of technology, so it's great in the sense of, if you want to save for retirement and having something automated, so you don't even think about it.
Right.
That's great, right? Because the outcome is great. But let's say bad habits.
There's a
can
lot of
also
bad
form
habits
too with technology. So how do you see the technology playing out and how we shape mindsets and ultimately change academic behaviors for student success?
So the technology nowadays is much more advanced, but having technology developed is not a new thing. That's always been something that has been evolving and shaping the classroom in one way or another. I think it's so big right now because it's so much farther advanced than what we had before.
Yeah.
And so there's several things that it can help with. The first I had mentioned, taking that fear. We can use it in the classroom. We can have quizzes and stuff, instant feedback that we can get. The students can get instant feedback at home. We have these learning platforms where students answer questions and they know right away whether they're right or wrong.
Right.
And then they can use, show me an example or help me solve this problem, other things that can help them get instant help instead of, even 15 years ago, here's some problems from a textbook. The odd answers are in the back of the book. If you have questions, I'll see you in 2 days.
Right,
you can come in and ask questions. Well, now they can get instant feedback and know, oh, I was wrong. And a lot of these softwares will give them hints of what they did wrong. And so they're not waiting 24, 48 hours to get additional help on their assignments and understanding those concepts. So just having the resources at any moment in your hand, it's always available, you know, and just having that, you know, people may not think about this as learning, but how often does someone ask you a question and you're like, oh, I don't know. I'm going to Google it. I've got my phone right here. I can look up the answer. You're learning. You're learning. And so just having technology in our hands nowadays just brings a whole nother, it's just so much farther developed than what technology was 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
And so trying to incorporate that in a way into the classroom that faculty can use it to enhance and not hinder there. I think of one specific thing, calculators.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had calculators forever, but they've become more advanced and more advanced. And what's nice about the calculators now, and I'll use math because that's what I teach.
Yeah.
In statistics, we teach, you know, finding the mean and standard deviation of a data set.
Yeah.
Well, before we would have to spend so much time on how to find the mean, how to calculate it, and more important, and actually more tedious is how to calculate the standard deviation of data set. It took the whole class to teach that. And now instead of teaching, okay, here's the formula, here's how we plug in everything into the formula and get our result. Now I can say, okay, here's what it is. Here's the formula. You could use that if you want, but let's put this into the calculator. Let's or some other statistical system,
Right.
a program. Let's put it in there and have that program do the calculations for us. We don't have to sit and do all that tedious work. It can do that for us. And now instead of talking about how to do that tedious work, we can talk about what does this mean?
Right.
How do we use it? Where does it, you know, what do we use it for? What does it mean to us? And so we can have a deeper conversation about what it is rather than just how do you calculate it?
Right. So understanding more of the interpretation of that,
Absolutely.
hopefully teaching not to misinterpret the data that you're looking at.
Well, and then to use that to help you understand data that's presented to you.
Right, as a consumer, because we're just bombarded with this on a daily basis, which goes back to the first point we made in this conversation about a student understanding the purpose and relevance of a math course. Every day you're confronted
Absolutely.
with this kind of information. And so do you understand what they're saying?
Yeah. How do you tell, like, this is good data, this is not good data?
Right. So how do you know when somebody's trying to fool you?
Yeah. And I talk about that a lot in our classes, like, watch for this. Be careful. It's not wrong. The data's not wrong. What they presented to you is not wrong. How they presented it is misleading.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that's great. So, we're kind of wrapping up our time here. And as we think about the conversation, I'm just kind of curious your overall assessment of the concepts that are described in this book in relation to the work that you've been doing around mindset. So, again, kind of considering those more salient themes, what do you consider the most relevant points that you want to make sure that the listener really pays attention to coming out of this podcast?
So 2 things.
Okay.
1, to be open. Be open and try new things and adapt. We get it wrong as instructors. We try a new project. We try a new software. It doesn't work. It's okay. It's okay. We tried. We can move on next semester. So just to be open to trying the new technologies, trying new things, trying a new method. Talk to other faculty. What are they doing that's different? How can you improve? Is it working for them? Is it not working for them? Having those conversations about what we can do differently to help students improve. And then the other thing that I really love in this book is that making small changes to many things will bring about a significant overall change. I think I can't remember, was it England's bicycle team that were just failing? They were not good. And a new coach comes in and changes one little thing here, one little thing here, one little thing. And in the long run, those little things were like, oh, the material of your uniform's going to matter. Little things that didn't seem significant. But when you put all those little things together, it makes a big change overall. And the team turned itself around and started winning and was doing good. And so I think we have to remember that too. It takes a lot of small movements to move a large ship. You can't just turn a ship 180 overnight in one move. You have to move slowly. You have to take those small degrees. And so I think that's the other thing to consider is, hey, those small changes will make a difference. And if you can just change a little bit in even your personal life, what habits are you building in your personal life? Change one thing a day. Don't try to change it all at once. A little bit each day. And eventually you'll get to where you want to go.
Yeah, that's great. So yes, those of you that haven't started college yet, those of you currently enrolled, I think that's really good advice, even for folks who are serving as mentors to others. So always remember that just take it one assignment at a time. Then you complete a course. Then you complete another course, and you're building a whole pathway towards graduation, completion, and a career. So small steps. Don't think about the bigger picture quite yet. Just get through the day-to-day work that needs to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me and sharing some really great stories about your work with students and their perceptions of math specifically, but also how this relates to this concept of a growth mindset.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this edition of From the VC's Bookshelf, brought to you by TBR, the College System of Tennessee, powering the state's economy and changing the lives of thousands of graduates, starting successful careers each year. To learn more about upcoming book selections or to register to attend discussions live, visit tbr.edu/bookshelf.